love, faith, hope, freedom. None of these things are coming down. I just can't wait till I hit the ground. One more thing before I go. Got to find someone who wants to carry on, sing my song. Love me, love me, love me. Love me, love me, love me. Carry on, sing my song. Love me, love me, love me. Love me, love me, love me. Pride, vanity, illusion, insanity. All of these things are coming down. Just can't wait till I hit the ground. One more thing before I go. Got to find someone who wants to.
Folks, welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3773's Broadway. This edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And been off the reservation for a couple of weeks, and it is so if I'm a little bit excited, there's a reason, because we got a new soundboard, and looking forward to continuing on this journey that I'm on. As I head into the second decade of the Jake Feinberg Show, the end is not in sight. As the great Napoleon Hill said, anything the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Being behind the microphone has become a yogic state for me. The topics on my show have expanded to the metaphysical, out-of-body experiences on the bandstand, relentless pursuit of unsung luminaries, spirit, wisdom, and altered states of consciousness. Not me pontificating, of course, but rather the artists themselves, who don't shy away from the tough question. That's my job. Weave in and out of the dialogue, go deeper, ask follow-up questions. I'm looking for truth. It's hard to find, and I continue to be humbled by the accessibility of the musicians. They're not uptight, they groove, they swing, they don't romanticize sometimes, and they write different chapters in their musical memoirs, some filled with bright lights or dimly lit lanterns. In a lot of monotheistic religions, people listen to a pastor or rabbi or imam who serve as a conduit to divine wisdom and pass that on to their parishioners. When you're on the bandstand and everybody is on that frequency collectively, you're all a conduit to the divine. You get out of your own way and allow information to come through you. That's the salvation of music, when you realize you are only partially responsible for what you play or sing. My generation can perseverate over things that we love or that we're comfortable doing. The scary part is, oh boy, we got to get out and learn something new. We don't want to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. As a broadcaster, I could have submitted to the trend of politics, gossip, and controversy, but I decided to steer my show in a different direction. I wanted to interview artists about their contributions to our cultural heritage, more specifically how they define leadership, love, life, and lineage. I get a chance to do that today with an absolute shaman musician and a guy who, quite honestly, when I first started hanging out with this group, this cadre of authentics, I could tell he had a presence to him, which not everybody does, and I wasn't quite sure how to approach him. And over time, we bonded over maybe a record or some music, and I realized at a certain point that he's just like me. And in some ways, this individual represents everything that I stand for. And also, even when I do get lost in the woods on this journey, I recognize that it's people like my guest, who keep me on the righteous path because they lead with their heart. Uncle Ben Knight, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's an honor to have you, brother. I wanted to ask you, did you always have the capacity to write songs? And if so, for you, did the lyrics come first or the music come first?
I feel like I started to be able to write songs, in like a high school band, we would just make up a couple of chords, and then we had an actual singer. So I never had to think about that. And then same thing with the first band I was in college. I just played guitar. And then right about halfway through college, it definitely became a thing of like, well, we have to write songs. Everybody we were listening to were writing songs. And it was like, okay, it hasn't all been done. It's still happening. So now we have to create as well.
Because I was just transcribing my interview with David Nelson, and he was with Marmaduke, John Dawson, and New Riders, and that guy, Dawson, was writing songs every 5 minutes. So Nelson, he never felt like he could actually write songs. And then, the disco days, as he referred to it, the dark disco days came into play. And he moved up to Petaluma, and his wife worked at the Grateful Dead offices. And this is in the early 80s, I think, and she was getting a Mac Plus, which at the time was the leading cutting-edge computer. So she gave him her Mac, and he went over to the music store. Well, he got a sequencer, Master Tracks Pro, and he bought some synthesizers, a couple of drum machines, and he started to write songs. And he sent them, and he would send the songs to Robert Hunter, and Hunter said, don't send me the words, send me music first. In any event, here's a guy who was a prolific bandstand performer in different musical settings, but he never really believed he could write songs. And I just wanted you to talk about, in college, when it became more sophisticated, you recognized that there was clearly more, there was still a lot more out there, as you said, how you learned to fuse poetry with melodies and music.
I mean, I guess, I don't know if this is, lucky or unlucky, but it pretty much never, ever happens the same way.
Explain that.
Sometimes sometimes I'll have something on the guitar where I'm like, okay, this needs to be part of something. And then I'll build around that, and then, maybe a melody or some words will come. But probably more, in the latter 10 or 15 years, it usually comes just from something silly that happens. Like I'll sing something to my friend on their way out the door. Or, I'll be having such a good time somewhere and be like, all of a sudden, it got so hard to leave, and then you're just like, oh, stick that in the song because that's real. It's silly, but, it's like there's enough songs that aren't silly that.
Well, I mean, dude, you had people.
Plenty of room for silliness.
Yeah, I mean, Sly Stone, someone would write down on the back of a matchbook, everyday people, and the next thing you know, he's singing that, he's putting it to a song, I think that's the part that, I wanted you to, especially because when I saw you sing that tune at Fernwood with Los Hermanos Cosmico, it was really just, it seemed like an authentic tune that came out of you in some way, shape, or form. And I think a lot of people try to reinvent the wheel when writing songs because when in fact, like you said, there is no roadmap. There is no playbook per se, and otherwise you're dealing in a formula trip. So I mean, can you talk about the first song that you felt you could really put your stamp on as something where you had fully had the lyrics and the music and could call it your own?
Well, it's kind of one of the most perfect questions you could ask me because I'm in this really sweet spot of a circle coming all the way around right now with a lot of the stuff that's happening with the Farmer Dave and the Wizards of the West. Dave I've been playing on and off with him, the whole time since Beachwood started. But pretty on, the last 4 or 5 years, whatever band he had, I would more or less be in it.
Right.
But this current ball of energy that is the second Farmer Dave and the Wizards of the West album that is being recorded right now. He picked one of my songs from like 20 odd years ago and is like, okay, this is one of our songs. We're going to do this song. And I just, it was like either the most beautiful act of like a friend throwing a friend a bone, or he was really onto something, or, somewhere in between, but it was a beautiful thing. And this song, it's just, it's strange because I never really like recorded it or put it out, but it's just been kind of kicking it around, and, he always would remember the chords to it. And so it would always be kind of one of like the funner songs. If we were like, practicing or whatever, it would usually kind of elevate everything and stuff. So that song is actually one of the first songs I wrote where I was like, okay, this is good. I like this. I'm, happy about all of the things that are happening. And so for that song to now be like living and breathing and like happier than it ever could have thought it would be as a song.
Can you give us the name of the song, or is it under?
Yeah, the song's called "God on the Freeway."
God on the. Okay, I want you to go deeper on the idea when you first wrote it, and you guys were, it was like you said, it was an elevator. It was a mood elevator. Everybody, it was a fun song. Can you just talk about the aesthetics of that song that made you feel like you're like, okay, I feel comfortable? What was it about? Was there? Because
I was reading about Bob Dylan and how like when people started really being like, whoa, this dude can write songs, is when there were like characters in his songs. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, I need to write a song with some made up people in it. But also at that time I had gone to college in LA, and that's where I met up with Chris Gunst and Farmer Dave, and then of course Brent and the further Rademacher world, and Jimmy Tamborello as well. It was like a really sweet thing. But then I got a job that didn't totally work out after college, and I had to move back home to San Diego, which was great, but it was also like, there was all this stuff happening. Beachwood was forming, it was like a really super fluid and exciting time in like our little scene. And when I moved to LA, I was always like, I'm never going to move back to LA. I'm just going there to go to college and then get out.
Yeah.
But I found myself being like, okay, well, I'm moving back to LA.
I love it.
And so, via Glendora, which is like a whole nother beautiful story. But so I was writing it from the perspective of like, must I revisit the scene of my escape? Like I was like, I made it out of here, and willingly coming right back.
Did you willingly leave though? Yeah. Did you willingly leave, or I thought because the job didn't work out, you had to go home? I mean.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I haven't thought about it that hard in a long time.
Okay.
I definitely didn't want to go when I left, but I also, as a whole life thing was like, I'm not gonna live in LA. I'm not gonna be one of those people.
Except the coolest. I mean, thank God for your.
I've lived here more than half of my life, and I love it. I can ride my bike to the beach.
Sure.
I can ride my bike to work, and my wife and I share a car. She can ride her bike to work. She can ride her bike to the beach. So it's like we've got a sweet little slice of LA that if I had to live somewhere else, it'd probably be a lot different. Somewhere else in LA. So we kind of lucked into this sweet place, and we've kind of been here sort of throughout this whole journey, you know.
Did you? So let's just. So the made up characters in the. How, can you talk about the song form, and what you love? I mean, was it in 4/4 time? Was it an odd meter? Did it have? Was there? I mean, was how close to a? Was there no formula to it, so to speak? Was it not a pop tune?
I mean, it was kind of a pop tune. It was supposed to have this like recurring sort of tension where this part comes back sometimes but not other times, and then sometimes when it comes back it isn't where you think it might be, sort of thing. But I just wanted this pretty thing to keep happening over and over, whether it was like the beginning of the verse or the middle or whatever. And then I don't know. We were listening to a lot of Ride back then, and they had all these really super pretty ways of descending. So I just wanted to have a lot of pretty descents in it.
Talking to Ben Knight here on the Jake Feinberg Show, first interview after a little bit of a hiatus, and it's wonderful to be in this in this state of elevated consciousness with him, getting out of my slumber. Do you believe in the sort of the Socratic methodology in music that where you have to know what you don't know, and that would mean like you maybe just played a burning show and any contingent, and you had a couple of places where you really took off and took not necessarily a long solo, but you just caught fire, and I'd be like, how did you do that? And you would say, I have no idea. I mean, the idea that when did you recognize that you were a conduit? I mean, I think one reason you guys make LA so tolerable, really. I mean, you make LA a great vibe, and I know there's a lot of good cats around there, but I think the reason I gravitated to this cadre of people is because, I think everybody got the memo in some way, shape, or form that they are only partially responsible for what comes through them. And so you have to surrender to the idea that you have to know what you don't know. And I wanted to know about your evolution with that, because ultimately you've been in the music biz for a while, you've chosen your own route, but there are plenty of cats out there who really believe that they're God's gift to the world, and they think that they're fully responsible for everything that they do. It makes it incredibly unappealing to be around them or play with them. And I don't ever get that vibe from any of the cats that we love. And I wanted you to talk about that. I mean, when did you surrender to the understanding that you were a conduit to the divine?
Well, I was really lucky to be in the Tide from the beginning. And I played, bass for a couple of shows, but then we sort of reshuffled and I became the guitarist. And then through a little bit of time, it sort of became, a lead guitar role, or at least, co-lead guitar role kind of thing. And when we were going from like the first album to the second album, it was really a beautiful thing. It was a great band with Rick Mank on drums. It was, we were practicing enough to where the solos weren't long. Like, they were just these little solos, like solos in pop songs. But I just started deciding to play the solo different every time.
Right. I love it.
And I don't know why, I didn't really have any, reason to think that I could or should, but I was just kind of like, I'm gonna, and it usually worked out. And I just remember one time after practice, our keyboard player Ando was like, "Whoa, there's like a new solo," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that's just the way it's gonna be."
And I mean, when you because like when you took over the role of of the lead player, at least, one of the instrumental soloists, pretty quickly you were able to sort of realize that you could play the same solo the same way every time. But when you decided to just change it up, how does it work, metaphysically? I'm just curious because, it's not like you're...
And I have to make the disclaimer that this was I knew about the Grateful Dead and the Allman Brothers.
Right.
And I had, had already loved, especially the Allman Brothers, loved a lot of their songs and stuff. But I hadn't yet, gone off that completely weightless cliff to where I was like,
I dig.
Oh, which I very much have now. But
right.
This is, 20 years ago or a little less than 20 years ago. And, playing, 30 seconds of something that wasn't written was like, whoa.
Right. I did. But in some ways, that's the best. In some ways, that's the greatest time, I just,
So
in general, was it,
definitely-
I'd love to know, how did you, because it was kind of a fuck it approach. You're like, I'm just going to play it different I love that attitude. It's just, I don't think was that a learning experience for you to sort of get out of your thinking mind, to allow yourself to find
you're definitely putting yourself in a place where either something's going to happen or it isn't. So you do make yourself a little more aware in that moment because it has to come from somewhere, and you have to be open to wherever it's going to come from, or else you're going to be standing there with nothing.
So at this point, when you say the weightless cliff, can you talk about, I didn't see you stretch out a lot, and I know that it wasn't necessarily the venue, which was the Fernwood show. I was sort of waiting for you to take these blistering solos, and it was a little bit more of just sort of a, it was a set. It was a set for it was during COVID. It was mellower. But how can you talk a little bit about how you've learned to strike the balance, if at all? You could look Frank Zappa or Jerry Garcia on a good night, or some of the great jazzers.
Yeah, my philosophy about that type of playing is that you have to be able to not run out of ideas.
That's what I want. That was the question I had for you.
There's so few people that don't run out of ideas. Jerry Garcia, obviously, is just like the gold standard of not running out of ideas, no matter how long the solo is.
Gold.
And I don't feel that way. If I take a really long solo, I sometimes feel like I'm sort of like repeating myself, or, and not all the time. There's certain scenarios, at different band practices we've had, or just sort of less formal scenarios where it seems like we can go on forever. But in terms of you're up there on stage and it's your solo and you're on, I definitely, I feel like I experience sort of a limit on, more often than not, on how long I could just go before I'd be like, okay, it's someone else's turn.
Well, that's what I wanted to say is over time, how often is it that you, in the course of the more recent career, would you, think that you, or when you would listen back to something and you thought it was super hot and you realized that you were repeating ideas? I guess I'm just asking you as an improviser, somebody who's grown as an improviser, how have you learned to not wank it? How have you learned to say, okay, I've said my piece? When do you know that? Is it like, because, because Jerry had synesthesia. So I think there were times where when he was soloing, he'd be tasting something, like some delicious succulent food, or he'd be having and so he couldn't stop. And it wasn't a conscious thing. So I just wonder, how have you learned to say what you need to say? Because without just wanking it. You know, I don't really. Music is not overly precious for you, but at the same time, you're a craftsman. So how have you learned to strike that balance?
Well, I'll get a little bit of a commercial in right here.
Yeah, do it.
On Friday, I was with most of the people from the Wizards, Farmer Dave and the Wizards of the West, and we have a stream that's available till the end of this week, and it's just $8 through Folk Yeah, and it's us playing a lot of the songs from the album that we just recorded, but it's back in December, so it's a little bit of a time machine thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also play the last song from the first Farmer Dave and Wizards album on there. But so we're watching the thing, and our super sweet drummer, Chad Marshall, he was sort of making a comment about he never knows. He has to kind of be on his toes about when to come back in on a certain part, actually in the song we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'll do it for 40 seconds and sometimes I'll do it for 4 minutes.
I love it. I love it.
And I think that's kind of answers the question, is that it's just the scenario, you know. You know when there's 4 minutes in there, and you know when there's 40 seconds in there. You know, just based on, you know, how warm you are and where you are in the set and where you are in the world, or just any number of things.
Can you talk a little bit? I mean, how has the band, when you listen to those songs? I'm gonna get the stream and listen to and watch the show myself, but December wasn't that long ago. Do you guys feel like that the songs have changed since then?
Well, in our world, it's forever ago, because we recorded an album. You know, we recorded the album in January,
mm-hmm.
and then, you know, so it's like, it seems like a really long time ago. But, you know, and then like the holidays are in there, and it was just, you know, it's been a beautifully chaotic world in Wizards World. But I mean, it's not done, the album. We've done all of the basic tracks and tons of everything else, and so many beautiful backing vocals, and some of Dave's best singing I've ever heard him do, and, you know, 15 songs, super duper exciting. So, you know, we've just been like, for us, every day has been a week, and every week has been a month. So it seems like a long time ago.
Well, Ben Knight, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I'm going to put this voice in for you right now. Take a listen to the content. We'll come back and break it down.
Similar, you know, like I'm a little bit scrappy. I don't really have, you know, I don't have like the virtuoso qualities that I admire so much in others, you know, but I do have some personality. I got a little moxie, and I find my own way of playing simple things to give it like a bit of my own kind of, I don't know, flair. And some people can tell that it's me. And really, that stuff those are compensatory, you know, methods, really. Like a lot of times, if you don't have a whole lot of ability, you kind of make up for it with like personality, and you make up for it in other ways. And
sure.
I do that all the time. That's what my style is. It's all compensating for what I can't do. I feel like Mel Brown, I get that feeling from him when I hear those records, and but he was, you know, he had a wild, kind of reckless, like almost going off the rails kind of quality to his playing. There's great humor in his playing too. It's kind of that kind of not chicken picking, but that kind of scratchy thing he had it just makes me laugh sometimes. You know, there's a joy and a humor and kind of a whimsy in it that I love so much. So yeah, like, you know, I'm inspired by him a lot. Trying to get more humor into the playing is always like something I'm trying to get out of the Mel Brown records, and he's very underappreciated. I think he was from LA, right?
Ben, now you want to take a guess at who that is?
Well, I know who it is, Jake.
I know you. Yeah, well, that and it's a he
Can I
just.
change all? Can I change all of my answers to what he said, please?
No, well, I played that for the. I mean, listen, I knew.
No. I mean, I really like everything he said. Is like, yes, that.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
the
Well, I mean,
song,
it's just everything.
just applied to me, obviously, on a very hugely different scale. But everything he said, I'm like, dude, no, that's exactly.
Exactly.
It.
No, I mean, dude,
Exactly.
Ben
Like,
Knight,
I'm
dude,
just
you
like,
are. I mean, listen, his presence is here right now. I mean, I got an electric wave up my, inside the. I feel like I just
I
wanted.
got the electric wave too, but let me tell you really fast
Do it.
that I'm such a Mel Brown head, but my massive disclaimer is that I never went to Mel Brown Town with Neil. Like, somehow...
How did that happen?
Somehow it never... Well, I don't know. There's just so many beautiful records, and we were just on so many
Exactly.
different trips, surfing, record, musical, guitar, otherwise, that there's luckily so many beautiful trips that we never went on that one together. But, like... That Mel Brown music has gotten me all the way through, pandemic, COVID, whatever.
That is so beautiful. I'm, I mean, to know that.
And I've just gone so deep with it, and just like I've found so many other crazy records that maybe he plays on a song, or maybe he plays on the whole thing, and it also is like has affected the band because we have another guitarist now, Katie Skeen, and she and I bonded heavy over Mel Brown. And in some ways, strangely, it like made us such good friends that Dave saw our friendship as an asset and just like threw it into the band. And I kind of give Mel Brown a lot of credit for that.
Well, first of all, I was like, it took me a minute. I was trying to find that soundbite from my second interview with Kasalk. I'm like, this is going to make Ben smile because he's just talking about Mel. I mean, and then I hear Katie in those little clips that Farmers put up, and I mean, it's getting really funky. And I mean, and I just think that it's great that they that Mel has continues to inspire and connect, and him and Neely are definitely, trading licks up somewhere else in a different form. The stories vary. Again, out of school, people say, Ben and Neely met in Ventura and on the surf. But can you talk about did you meet Neely when you went back to L.A. for the second time? When was the first time you met him?
The first time, I think like we had been in the same place before and like nodded to each other or something. But the first time I know that like we spoke and met and hugged and stuff was actually my birthday. It was the year was 2001, or no, was it? Yeah, it was like either that or early 2002. But it was the Beachwood Sparks band that had put out Once We Were Trees, and then when they went to go tour it, they took Neil with them. That was when Neil first played with them.
Sure.
And that was like when they went on tour with the Black Crowes. But when they came back from that, I think they did like some European stuff, and then they did some West Coast stuff. I don't know like in which order. But however it was, they ended up at the Troubadour on my birthday. And, normally I would play some of the set with them, but Neil was, he was their guy and had been their guy for a while as like, the fifth guy in the band. But, it was my birthday, and so they were like, come down and play the encore.
Sure.
So Neil is far, far stage right. I'm far, far stage left. And we're playing Looking for a Love by Neil Young and By Your Side, the Sade song. But I just remember looking across during the Neil Young song, and we were just like smiling at each other. And I'm like, okay, friend, ding. And then after the show, we just talked and hugged and, been in touch, kind of ever since, sometimes all the time, sometimes only, once every couple months, or, we both had went a lot of different ways for a few years. And then I super reconnected with him when CRB happened. We had seen each other a fair amount, in the time in between. But then once that started happening, we got super reconnected. And I think that's around when he moved to Ventura, and, we would surf together and buy records and so on.
I mean, so I just need, for my own well-being, I mean, because me and you were obsessed with Mel Brown, obviously, Neely. But I mean, can you talk about going to the record dives with a classic records that you and him obsessed over, and maybe one day even found in a store? I mean, to me, like, you talk to his friends on the East Coast, musicians. I mean, he was drummer Dan Faidel would say that, like, when Ryan Adams and the Cardinals was in New York, it'd be like 6 or 7 in the morning, and Neely would be calling him from the city saying, like, I can't hang out. I can't deal right now. I got the whole day I got to come out to Jersey and, take a break. And, next thing you know, he's out in Parsippany, and they're getting Indian food and then diving for records. I'm like, can you share a great, what were some of the albums or people off the grid cats that you guys really got off on, any genre?
Well, usually a record shopping trip with him would be courtesy of either no swell in the ocean or too much wind in the ocean. It was always like surfing first.
Right.
But, obviously the ocean and the weather is fickle enough to where we got to do plenty of record shopping. So, and Ventura's, really good for record shopping. There's like big stores, medium stores, little stores. And, and people selling lots of good records. So it's always churning and nice up there. Some of the stuff, I think, it's kind of silly to say because Spirit is like such a regular part of my like daily religion now.
Of course.
But definitely one of the first Spirit records that I got.
Interesting.
We were just like, I was like, I don't know, I'm intimidated they have so many, and he's just like, well, just get that one and then get every other one, so on and so forth. And that was like right around the same time Farmer Dave had played me Spirit of 76 on our way back from Big Sur. So I was just like this Spirit fruit getting ready to be eaten.
That is so. Wait, Spirit. So there's a Spirit album called Spirit of 76.
Well, that wasn't the one that I bought. I think the one I bought when I was with Neil was the second Spirit album, The Family That Plays Together Stays Together.
Well, no, because what's just so amazing is, there's a whole other, now we're going down a whole other rabbit hole. Emil Richards, my dear uncle, vibraphonist, put out a great album from Dante's, which was a great jazz club in L.A. in the 70s called Spirit of 76. I got to send that to you. It's an amazing freaking album. That's a whole other deal.
Wow.
Yeah, no, dude, I can't believe. I thought when you said Farmer Dave played you Spirit of 76, I'm like, this. You have to be kidding me, because I have it on. I can't wait to foist that on you. That's one of the hippest albums of all time.
I have to double check, but I'm pretty sure Spirit of 76 came out in 1975. I have to look on the frickin'.
I'm gonna go after that album. I don't even know that album. I couldn't believe it.
Oh man, you're gonna love it. It's got such a really beautiful version of like a Rolling Stone. That's like he sings in this beautiful, like high voice, and got an amazing space guitar solos with all crazy delays, and it's like, no, not another version of like a Rolling Stone, but I promise you it's so worth it.
Oh, it's.
I actually play when I do the odd, solo show. I like to play like a Rolling Stone, and it's like 70% Spirit, 20% Dylan 1966 live in England.
Wow.
And then
Wow.
10% my own.
Well, I was going to say, so you really, going back to this idea of characters in a song, I mean, that first song, I going back to...
God on the Freeway.
God on the Freeway. Who were the characters? Who were the characters?
Commercial.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's another commercial.
That's fine. Yeah,
God
yeah,
on the Freeway is in the stream. You can hear it. It's like the third or fourth song we play.
Oh, I cannot wait for $8. Go to Folk Yeah. $8. I love the plugging. You really are a radio guy. That's the thing. Farmer came through from New Mexico a few months ago. You know, I've only had physical contact with some cats, maybe 3 or 4. I mean, I feel very fortunate to have been healed by music very little during COVID, but the times that I've had, it's been very cathartic for me, and I miss it deeply. But Farmer came through, and we were doing an interview, video interview, and I mean, I have it clear as day, and put up the clip on Instagram. It blew my mind, man. He said, well, he's just said it in a lot of different ways, and I know you're gonna brush it off because that's kind of the person you are. But he said, you were the straw that stirred the drink. You were the Babe Ruth of the whole thing. And he said that at Loyola Marymount, you were already on the radio before him and Gunst came aboard, and you hit them to all sorts of crazy music, and everybody. Brent said the same thing. You are I don't know what the right word is, the source. I mean, that's a pretty heavy compliment, and I don't need you to toot your own horn, but can you talk about being, I don't know, somewhat of a shepherd at that radio station, KX, I don't remember the call letters, but...
KXLU, yeah, KXLU 88.9. It was at Loyola Marymount, and yeah, I got involved with it right away. You know, when I was a freshman, because I just, loved music, and I'm like, whoa, people are sending free records in here, and like, there's all this stuff I've never heard before. But it sounds like all the music I love, but it's just like, all these different worlds, and Pale Saints and Swerve Driver, and I'm just like, whoa, you guys are amazing. And then I became the music director by the time I was a senior. And I think Dave was a sophomore, and Jimmy and Chris were freshmen when I was a senior. But, we just all loved music so much that we just, got into it on any level possible. And I would play with them, and then those Jimmy and Chris got into Further as additional members. That's the ER Further.
Right.
With Brent and Darren. And so, that's to go back to the song that we're talking about, God on the Freeway. That was kind of the stuff that was happening that made me be like, I have to come back because, like the scene, was coming up around all of us that went to school there, and then it was meeting up with this other scene. And then, there's also other people involved, like this guy, Rex Thompson, who knew crazy, obscure 60s and 70s music that was always just right. Always just right. I mean, you need to have the whole trip with Dave about Rex.
What's about this Jimmy Cat? Who's this Jimmy Cat? I don't know who this Jimmy Cat is.
Jimmy Tamborello is actually, hopefully you won't mind me saying, he's kind of the most successful musician amongst us in terms of success.
Oh, man. Wow, dude. Where's he at?
He has a band called Dintel, DNTEL, and they put out really, really beautiful music. He's also... had a whole bunch of other different monikers, but he made all the music for Postal Service.
Wow.
Which is, not only is it really great music, but it, did incredibly well and, continues to. It's like timeless music now. And it's interesting because back when I would be writing God on the Freeway and like coming up and visiting and playing with Chris and stuff, he would disappear to his room sometimes and just like work with his synthesizers. And if I'm being totally honest, sometimes we're like, man, I wish he'd come out here and hang out with us. We're having so much fun out here. And but you know, it's good that he was working on those synthesizers.
I mean, you just said a word there, and I need to ask you, because you know, we just, you know, I think people like us, I told you yesterday on the phone that, you know, you recognize that, you know, really the only way to inspire change is by affecting positive change in your own world. You can't really deal with a lot of issues that are out of your control. And you use this word, success, and, you know, for so many people, that the brainwashing has been so severe. And I can't really point necessarily the finger at any one in particular, except maybe just the culture of capitalism and the culture of commodifying things and having little toys, and, you know, and I remember even talking to, when I interviewed John Densmore, and he wrote a book about literally having to take Ray Manzarek and Robbie Krieger to court because he did not want them to use, you know, they were going to go on a Doors reunion tour, but he said, you're not using the Doors. You want to put the new Doors, Doors of the future, whatever it is. Brother Jim was the one who told us, we're not going to, you know, sell our souls out for this music. And, you know, he just said that, you know, those guys, Robbie and Ray, they came from kind of low middle class backgrounds, and once they got the brass ring, it got so tight they couldn't let go. They were just the greed factor. And so for Ben Knight, what is your concept musically of success?
It's a good question because there's so many examples of people that had, quote, success, that Dave and I were just having a deep, deep talk the other morning about the band Dire Straits. Oh. And they're, you know, those first albums are so amazing. They got so good. They were playing arenas. And we're watching this 1985 video where it's just like, it's not even people playing music. It's just like sorcerers floating around, shooting lightning beams everywhere. Exactly. Like the band is just so deeply hot and able to do literally anything. But then we're like, okay, well, what's the next album? What's the next? And it's like, it, you know, I'm sure, I haven't listened to their last album enough to be like dismissive of it. And I'm sure one day I'm going to like love it so much and laugh about this. But, you know, it's like that ball of energy. Everything was so perfect in that band. They were playing Wembley. They were playing Live Aid with Sting. Like, it was just like so amazing. And then it just seemed to sort of, you know, we read this thing where Mark Knopfler said it became more about being famous than it did about the music.
Exactly.
And so it's like, I would define success as staying well far from that line, but still being treated well and respected for what you bring to the table. And I don't know, I occupy this, sometimes I feel guilty because I occupy this spot where like my day job is pretty solid, but it also gives me allowances of time to, you know, get away and do things if the scheduling is right. And Neil, getting back to Neil, he used to be really, really vocally, you know, jealous of my lifestyle, that I'm able to have the security of not, music isn't what's feeding me or, you know, moving my household along, but still being able to get in there and, you know, play good shows with great bands and with really fun, amazing people. So, you know, in some weird, corny way, I'm kind of super successful right now.
Dude, I mean, I remember Spursky in one of our interviews, he said that that after, I think it was after the Beachwood tour, and it was a rugged tour. I mean, it was after 9/11. The Black Crowes audiences were pretty Americana. They didn't always appreciate Beachwood. It was rugged. It was tough. I think the whole thing, Spursky said Neil broke out in a full body rash because of the stress. They were they were young. They were making fun of each other's clothes. It was not, CR was really sweet to them, but it was a turbulent tour, and they get off the road. They finish the tour, and, you know, they're heading home, and Spursky looks over and he's like, "What are you doing?" And Neil's like, I got to go back out. I got work to do. He's like, "You're not going to take any time to decompress?" And he's like, "I can't." Because that was what was feeding him. Obviously, he lived for music. And I think that nobody's more passionate and nobody loves music more than you. But I think you're right, man. I think the balance is key. Because ultimately, I mean, can you talk a little bit?
I mean, I'll definitely cop to some jealousy, though. I mean, I'll cop to... Mm-hmm. There's been many times over the years where I've seen my friends go out on tour when it's during the school year. A tour that either I couldn't go on, you know, for whatever reason, and be like, why do I keep myself saddled to this thing when I could just be gypsying it out like everybody else?
That's totally natural. I love it.
You know, so it's like, I'm not going to just sit here and be like, I never think that, because it happens all the time. But, you know, so sorry. Go on.
No, it's fine. No, I mean, it's so classic. I mean, can you just talk about, I mean, here's the point. You know, you love to surf. You love your family. Security is key. And you get a chance to play with really righteous dudes and women and play music to get stuff out of your system. So you kind of have everything. I never thought that live touring of music would become, quote unquote, a wedge issue in our country. But, you know, it's a kind of a twofold question. You know, before the pandemic, you know, it seems like a long time ago, but, you know, I think back to all sorts of different bands. Doesn't matter what they were touring a lot. A lot of people were playing a lot of shows. But I don't know about how well they were being compensated. In fact, I know they weren't being compensated well at all. And now I look at it and I say, you know, I'm hearing, you know, I just wonder, coming out of the pandemic, I mean, the one industry that has not come back at all is live touring music. They put fans in the stadiums for sporting events. They put people on airplanes. Schools may or may not reopen, but most every industry has come back. But the only way you can make money in music today is what you just talked about, is by hitting the road. And I wonder about, if you could just kind of philosophically talk, if Ben Knight was given the microphone, so to speak, at an event where you were trying to you know, inspire and encourage people that had the purse strings, so to speak, as to why a musician should be seen as a viable profession. I mean, let's face it. I mean, your teaching gig gives you security, insurance, stability, and you like doing it. And then you can play music without that angst of, well, I mean, is it even worth doing? I mean, of course it's worth doing it because of the spiritual part of it. But I just wonder, in your mind, if you can talk about because I just believe, you go back to the 50s. I've done so many interviews. Dizzy and Miles, Coltrane. I mean, those guys
No,
weren't.
I would say thank you so much for saying that,
Yeah.
because that really, you definitely hit on something that is an issue, because I'm friends with so many people that they have to be treated a certain way or else they can't pay their rent.
Exactly.
And one way I've been able to, and it just bums me out for my friends that don't have this luxury, but I've still able to have that attitude of like, you're gonna let me play a show?
I know. It's so great.
I'll come play.
Yeah, right.
Do we have a show? There's no money. Let's go.
That's
and
so
it's
beautiful.
like, but it's like it can't be that way.
And that's right. And that's why I'm upset, because it can't be that way. It
Like,
can't
it
be
has
that
to
way.
be that way. And it's just like this. It's kind of like that line, that success line we were talking about. It's like the other end of it.
Exactly.
There's you don't want to become the arena band that loses their soul, but you also don't want to lose your soul, being treated like crap for, doing something that's actually really beautiful.
I mean, you go back. I mean, bass players with Joe Henderson would take trains to Poland and feet of snow and be playing brothels, and maybe they get $400 a week per diem, but the cost of living wasn't so great. So it's so nice. It's so cool for you to have that lifestyle, but like, why? It's assuming, let's just say there were layoffs or whatever. Let's just say you made a different decision and you were so horny to play music that you had to become a professional musician, and you cast your fate to the wind. Everything is so quantifiable in our society. Everything is so data driven now. I mean, and music is so unquantifiable and so non-tangible, and it's so spiritual. And I just, for people that might hear this 20, 30, 50 years down the road, long after we've left the planet, why should a musician be seen as a viable profession?
I mean, ideally, they can do something that can change everything. It's almost like Bill and Ted level of like Wild Stallion, like you have the potential.
I love it.
To change everything. I mean, music, it's, popular music. I don't want to speak too much about it because I don't listen to that much of it, but I don't know that it's like, I don't know. It's like it's just that the potential that the whole world could all be singing one song at once is still there, and it seems like it's come close to happening a few times. Not that that's necessarily the goal, but just the idea that like people can just hum these things that, and then there they are forever.
I'd like you to talk about one of those times that where collectively we got close. You're talking like Concert for Bangladesh. Like what year? When did we get close to reaching that frequency where it was recognized that the universal language of music could potentially heal the world? It's just an opinion. There's no right or wrong.
I just think of, no, I hear you. I just think of like, and it's all perspective too, because maybe the whole world wasn't all, but I don't know, just like certain like, like a Michael Jackson song like Human Nature or something. Like there would be a time where that was just all you would hear, and you would go into the store, and then you'd come out of the store, and then the car would go by, and then like, just, not that we have to go there in the whole Michael Jackson personal side of things, but there's like a song the whole world is singing that has a really beautiful message, or like The Man in the Mirror or something like that, or going back to like a song like Ohio by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, just all these different things where music was getting people through something either really horrible or really amazing, or just making them feel like, okay, well, this is how humans feel. Cool. That makes me feel less weird.
Mm-hmm. I dig. I mean, this is really important. You know, can you talk, I mean, just talking to you now, like, you know, it's like, it's obvious that, you know, you've been impacted heavily by the swell of the water and the waves, the buoyancy of the water. It's too cold. I have a pool where I live, but it's too cold to swim and it's not heated. Can you talk a little bit about how water and maybe more specifically surfing has maybe kept you sane and helped you, you know, with your equilibrium and anxiety, if that in fact is true?
It is. I mean, surfing is like a super momentum-based thing in my life where, like, if you're doing it a lot, all you think about is going to do it again and that wave that you caught. But if you're like sort of forcing yourself and it's just like once every couple of weeks, you're like, oh, you know, my feet are going to get sandy and I have to, like, you know, pay for parking,
right,
or, you know, whatever it is. You think about all the negative things. But when it's good and when it's right, it's just a beautiful part of the routine. You know, you just kind of figure out when the tide is going to be just right, and you build your day around that. And luckily, all of the friends that you know that you do that, so they don't try to talk you out of it. Which is also a really important thing, having friends that recognize that the tide and the wind sometimes are what you have to plan around.
No, I love that. So, I mean, when you're sort of in that inconsistent phase, you're thinking about everything but the surf. But when you're in the flow,
yeah, you're like, oh, I'm never going to find a parking spot, or there's so many guys out there, and one of them's going to yell at me because I'm riding the wrong kind of board, or
right,
you know, it's
right,
like
right.
Sadly, there's like a kind of a pretty dark.
This is really there's an undercurrent to this whole thing. Yeah.
So the blissfulness of surfing is a thing. I mean, it comes from a supply and demand thing that so many other bummers come from, but. You know, there's only so many beautiful waves, and there's a bunch of people that want them.
Do you feel like it's helped? Like, I mean, how did that, growing up in San Diego, were you on a board right away from, like, how did you, you know, learn to?
I got into it just because I had friends that were, you know, getting into it at the same time. We were skateboarding and like watching surfing on TV, and a natural thing was just to want to surf. And I'd always been in the water, you know, boogie boarding and stuff. I was lucky enough to spend 4 years in Hawaii from 6 to 10 years old. And that definitely is something that, you know, obviously changed me, and I carry that with me. And I would super, you know, you and myself and Clay from Mapache, maybe Sam too. We need to have a deep whole nother series of episodes about Hawaiian music. But
huge.
There's just something about the Hawaiian, you know, just the water and just the gentleness of that, you know, hopefully, I think, you know, kind of informed my vibe, at least somewhat.
I mean, I got to read you this quote. Been doing a lot of background on Ben Knight before the interview. It's from Aaron Spursky. He said, Ben is a soft-spoken Buddha bear. He serves the music through his demeanor and chemistry he brings to any given project. It's that soft, focused vibe that takes the music to a whole other level. He's also had pivotal great contributions in moments within Beachwood Sparks. One time we were tearing down our mics on Once We Were Trees. We had recorded about 17 songs and were done with the session. Ben comes into the room and says, wait, I think we should record By Your Side by Sade as a cover. We listened to it and decided to give it a play. With the remaining 3 mics on the drums, we quickly knocked that out. And that ended up being the song that paid back all of our loans to Sub Pop Records. We developed a whole new group of fans because of that song. That's one of Benji's whispers on the wind after the fact. He plays a really distinct role from my position in the band. He's never been one to bend things to his will or way. He's got a Buddha vibe to him. And I think that that's about as high a praise as you can get. Basically, following the muse, also having like impulse and a taste and a recognition to say, wow, we're not going to just like, we're not going to wring all the soul out of something, but let's take a chance on this and let's do so. It's all about aesthetic and point of view, intuition and instinct. And I just kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about, like, as you've gone along musically, how you've learned to trust, because as far as, you're not, you're more of a street scholar, you didn't come out of the academy. And over time, how you've learned to trust your instinct and intuition and know that the most beautiful things can come from that.
Well, if you're talking Buddha, I have to pass it straight up the line to Chris Gunst.
Right.
Even though he's younger than me, I think of him as like an older Buddha brother in many, many ways. And I guess it's just being who you are no matter what you think somebody might think. Because I was listening to George Michael, and I just like never stopped liking him, and he would put out an album like every 6 years, and I would check it out, and sometimes he'd even have to get it on import.
Right.
He was like that disrespected and that far out of like commercial favor. And Chris comes over and he's like, this is so good. And he's like, if you like this, you have to listen to the new Sade. And like another person who puts out an album like every 6 years. And so we're digging that together. And that was like, Chris reacting to me, listening to something that, the average Beachwood fan wouldn't be expecting. Me and Chris having a conversation about George Michael and Sade. But, that was just us being real and listening to what we loved. And that led directly to, what Aaron described there, and that song just sort of being in our heads or in our world. And I actually got to play one of Jay Mascis's guitars on that song. So that's a super cherished memory for me for, lots and lots of reasons. It ended up in a movie, and like Aaron said, it ended up, helping out with some debts.
Yeah, you are, to me, like, you're,
record
dude, you're like the guy, you are the guy that is the glue to a championship team, a band. It's under, being yourself, has that, I talk about that a lot because I think that the more that you can be vulnerable and that you can make mistakes, especially on the bandstand, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't think about it. I just have to go in a different direction. Then it opens up all these new doors in the music, and you find your own voice and your own sound and being yourself. But it's so much easier said than done.
It's layers. It comes in layers, like meeting Brent and Darren and Further and all of that scene. That made me peel a layer of, whatever, I don't know, peeled off a layer where I felt like, okay, I'm a little more around people that are just super into what I'm into. And then moving on from that into like the Beachwood world and like that whole scene, we were able to be ourselves like even more. And then moving on a few years ahead, the CRB scene and like reconnecting with Neil. And then I was lucky enough to become one of their DJs. I would DJ for them pretty regularly.
Really? I don't think
and
I really.
Strangely, that was during some years where I was not playing that much music. I wasn't not playing as much music. I had this band called Honeycrisp that was a duo, that, we'll have a whole nother Honeycrisp episode.
No, we're
another
just getting,
day.
yeah, no, this is, we're
But
this is great, man.
but that was sort of reaching, coming towards its conclusion, and the Farmer Dave Wizards thing as it is wasn't quite up to where it is right now. And there was a couple years there where I would play the odd Tide show or the odd thing here and there, but mostly I was probably DJing a lot more than I was playing. But I would also be watching CRB playing 2 sets 3 nights in a row or whatever. So I was being musically educated, I feel like, during those years, heavily, just massively, frontally educated by total masters on a super regular basis.
I don't even, listen, we okay, so 71 minutes in the books. I mean, should we continue do part? I just feel like the momentum is, we've got the fire lit. Should we pick up part 2 maybe next week?
Sure.
Sound good?
No, that sounds fantastic.
I just, there's a lot, man, it's like, there's just so much more to get to, not even historically, but just like as we move forward, societally, culturally. And I feel like, you're in a really unique position to bring elemental stuff to the table that is not always seen but can always be felt, and we always have to continue to feel. We can't lose the ability to feel and become so devoid of feeling that we become calloused and ignore the realities of, like you said, the pain within the world. And ultimately, maybe, for Brent and Darren and Dan Horn, Mapache, all these guys who I cannot even imagine not being able to essentially do what their yoga is for over a year. I mean, can you say that? You don't have a crystal ball. Do you believe? Do you have any words, inspiration for your peers and your musician friends? Do you worry that the longer this insanity and virus goes on, that I don't want any.
I don't know. I think that there's a lot of things about how music was being presented to people.
Yes.
Had gotten really formulaic.
Interesting. Yes.
Really, just how the way a club was run, how the way sound was run, how the way sound checks were run, how the way schedules were run, the way tours were, like, all of these things were the way they were because they were the way they were. So here's my positive message, is that when we come back, we can rebuild it in the image that we would like to see, rather than jumping right back on what we were doing. And that's going to take everybody. That's going to take the people that run the clubs and the people, if there's record labels or just any of that stuff. But the reason I think that is because in my day job, we're definitely doing that. When we go back to teaching in the classroom, it's not going to be like it was before. All of the things that we learned about how to do things differently, some of those things work so well that we better just hang on to those things, and
Absolutely.
not just throw them out. And I think that, some of the things with some of the webcasts we've been doing, some of the ways people have been creative about having shows where it's still distanced, or just, I don't know, people are getting outside of the box to make certain things work. And I'm just hoping and thinking that some of these out-of-the-box things can, continue when we go on to this next phase of whatever live music can become.
I think that's where we're going to pick up in set 2. Ben Knight, it is. I'm very humbled to have connected with you, man. Your presence is strong, your vibe is strong, and I'm mad props to you, man, for being yourself, heavy quote about Guns.
Well, let's bookend with one more commercial.
Dude, no, I want to say, what do you want to get off your chest? What do you got to hit it? Go ahead.
I just want to say one more time, because we talked about it in the middle and we talked about it in the beginning, but it seems like one thing that's kind of gone throughout our conversation is like this song, God on the Freeway, and kind of the ideas behind it, because it is super angsty. And like when I wrote it, I'm just like, we were watching that movie, the movie Vanishing Point a lot. And Chris Gunst used to joke with me, like, I don't know, some of your songs, you sound like a Kowalski, like you just can't take it anymore kind of a guy. And, you know, it's like a little bit that kind of a song, and it's never been in better shape. And if you want to hear it, you can hear it on the stream, because Dave was such a sweetie pie, and he put the song in the band, and it's living a really healthy, happy life right now in Farmer Dave and the Wizards of the West. That band is living a really healthy, happy life right now. We just released our first album. Dave and myself and a couple other sweetie pies, Brian Bardis and Judd, were that band. But that album actually came out while we were recording the second album. So we were kind of feeling, Dave and I were feeling, you know, pretty awesome about that. Like, okay, we're making an album, we're releasing an album, we've got this live stream in the can. So things are really, really sweet and good in Wizards World, and we're really excited about the mixes that we're putting together for the new album and everything. So I would say buy that first album, but definitely check out the live stream, because it's only going to be there till Friday, I think.
And God on the Highway is the third track. Not the
God on the Freeway is like the third, maybe.
That
the
is so
song.
classic. So there was no set list. He just said, let's play that. That was very spur of the moment.
I don't know exactly. The way we were recording it, we would record a couple of songs and then take a little break, because it didn't have to be a concert because there wasn't an audience.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, you'll see there's a couple of shots in the thing when you see it where they sort of pull away, and there's just like a dog, or, you know, the promoter's kid, or just like, you know, you'll see a cameraman or whatever. But we really did. We played the songs to essentially nobody. Except for these big, giant, beautiful redwood trees.
Britt Govea, man. I mean, we have Ben. We're
God
just
bless him.
Yeah, bless him. and I'm gonna send you the Spirit of '76. Emil Richards going to blow your mind, maybe more than the Spirit album. We got some nice momentum here, man. So go and bless you, and go enjoy your day, and we'll do it again.
Thank you so much.
All right.
God bless you too.
Much love, dude.
Bye.
Late. Absolutely legendary character. Benji Knight has had an impact on a lot of amazing genius characters and musicians by being himself. And that's all we can ask for in this day and age. It's great to be back on Power Talk. We'll be back later in the week. Until then, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. Peace.